Double check. This is new to me. I like to watch YouTube, but I've never done live YouTube until the other day, and that was a experiment for sure. So hold on, let me see if I'm doing this correctly here. Oh, yes. All right. So let's see if I can do this so I can share it, because I'll give you a little thing here. I was banned from doing live Facebook videos for 30 days because I shared a post from a guy that was banned from Facebook. And I had no idea that would ban me from Facebook. Obviously, I don't normally not follow rules, if you want to, per se, but I'm going to put this on Facebook via YouTube, and let's see if they will take it down. I don't know. YouTube. All right. I am going to tag my family so they can watch. And thank you very much for having patience with me during this. I'm figuring things out because technology is not my forte. It is not. It is not. Okay. So I have a lot to talk about today, but especially today is Constitution Day. I'm going to talk about that and the importance of the Electoral College, and give a little history. And heritage.org, the Heritage Foundation, has a fabulous booklet on that. I'm going to share it with you because it's so important. Not very many people understand the Electoral College. I didn't really until recently, so I want to bring that to you. Also, talking about, of course, goes along with that is the problem with mail-in ballots, mail-in voting, and there's been a lot of problems. And I found something interesting. If you don't follow Tucker, he had a segment on the other night. I was a little shocked because I'm not in. My dad was in the military, for 23 years. He served our nation for 23 years, so I was a proud Army brat, but I didn't understand some of this as far as foreign entities, elections, that kind of thing, and what the U.S. does. But Tucker brought some very interesting information that I want to bring to you. That's kind of, I don't like to say scary, because with my hope and trust in Jesus, I'm not going to be scared, but it's a little scary. But first, I'm from Tennessee, and for the most part, we've had some counties that have had to, speaking of the virus, had to, put in mask mandates. The governor himself did not put a mask mandate. There have been mayors and counties that have done that, especially at the Capitol in Nashville, and the health department there, and shutting down or severely restricting certain businesses and things like that. And so I was pretty like, wow, this article that came up today, I'm going to share, happened in Nashville. I was just like, that was in Nashville, Tennessee? What the heck? So the first thing, I'm just going to, there's a real quick tidbit here. In Nashville, it says COVID-19 emails from Nashville mayor's office show disturbing revelation. It was very disturbing. Excuse me. The coronavirus cases on Lower Broadway may have been so low that the mayor's office and the Metro Health Department decided to keep it secret. Emails between the mayor's senior advisor and the health department reveal only a partial picture, but what they reveal is disturbing. The discussion involves the low number of coronavirus cases emerging from bars and restaurants and how to handle that. And most disturbingly, how to keep it from the public. So they did a little contact tracing, experiment or whatever it was. And they found that the restaurants and bars only reported 22 cases of COVID. But they had higher cases, of course, in nursing homes and in construction, 1,000 each cases. Now, again, that terminology cases has been co-opted. Okay, cases used to mean the people that were showing symptoms and were very sick. That was what case used to mean. Used to mean for cases. But what they're doing now is they're saying anybody who tested positive, even though you don't have symptoms, they're calling that a case. So see how they're subtly, slyly changing the language of it to make you think that cases is like people who are deathly sick. That isn't true. All right, a case, what it's supposed to mean is a case is somebody who has symptoms and is very sick, whereas it's just those who are test positive just means they might be positive, but they have no symptoms. Okay, completely different. So anyway, Leslie Waller from the health department asked, this isn't going to be publicly released, right? Just info for the mayor's office. Correct. Not for public consumption, writes senior advisor Benjamin Eagles. So a month later, the health department was asked point blank about the rumor there are only 80 cases traced to bars and restaurants. I guess a month later, there had been a few more. The reporter asked, the figure you gave of more than 80 does lead to a natural question. If there have been over 20,000 positive cases of COVID in Davidson County, and only 80 are traced to restaurants and bars, doesn't that mean restaurants and bars aren't a very big problem? And so the health department official asked 5 health department officials, please advise how you recommend I respond. And the name at the top of this response is clipped off, but here's what it says. My 2 cents. We have certainly refused to give counts per bar because those numbers are low per site. We could still release the total, though, and then a response to the over 80 could be because that number is increasing all the time and we don't want to say a specific number. So they're covering up and fabricating information. They've blown their entire credibility. It's gone. So how can you even trust them? So if this is happening in a very conservative state, okay, Tennessee is a really conservative state, one of the few that has a supermajority Republican state house, Congress, whatever you call it. Where else is this happening? If this is of course, Nashville is, the mayor there is Democrat. But again, this is a Republican majority state. If it's happening in this state, where else is it happening, right? So just throwing that out there to you because I want you to know the truth. That's my goal, to bring you truth because it's important. It's important to know that. Okay, moving on. Today, what is today? Constitution Day, September 17th, Constitution Day. I want to bring this over to the screen. And anything to do with Constitution, history, that kind of thing, the places to go and resources for that are heritage.org. They're very, very good. And Hillsdale.edu, Hillsdale College. And if you want, like my son told me, he was doing these classes. They're online. They're free. And they do all kinds of history classes, Hillsdale.edu, free online classes. They have a video segment, and then they have questions you can answer. They even have a test if you feel like you want to do that. And they give you a little thing at the end, a certificate thing. But they have all kinds of history classes that you can take to get informed, since a lot of things in our educational system are not teaching our kids about our true history. So before I start that, I have to bring you some information I found, because I'm going to kind of go through the Constitution Day and the importance of it, but what coming into this election and why it's so important. But I will throw this number out to you. You may not know this. 15 to 20 million evangelicals are not registered to vote. They're not registered to vote. What? Oh my goodness, that's like our number one civic duty is to go out and vote. So that's kind of a disturbing number, 15 to 20 million not registered to vote. So even then, it was evangelicals who pushed Trump across the finish line in 2016. I mean, he, in several states by a slim margin, was able to win in a couple of these states that normally go Democrat because, evangelicals got out and voted. But that was in 2016. And then you move forward to 2018, and 40% of those evangelicals, I guess the registered ones, didn't even vote in 2018. And what did we get? We lost the House. All right. We have all these crazy bills and things that they're trying to push through the House. Thank God right now we have a Senate that stops it, but it's the only thing right now. So that's why this election is so extremely important, why I try to bring information to you, especially to Christians, because it is not just your civic duty, your biblical, I think, duty as a Christian to influence society. And when you influence society, one of the basic, simple ways you can do that is to vote. And you have to vote, obviously, the biblical values. And, a lot of Christians even some that I know, well, I don't like Trump. I don't like Trump. I really don't like Trump. Okay, put that aside as far as personality issues, and you have to look at what he's done and the things that he stands for and the religious freedom that he promotes. It's just overwhelmingly positive. So anyway, today is Constitution Day, and it's essential, right? The right to vote. We should reflect on that. This is heritage.org. And through the Constitution, America has continuously strengthened our union by expanding rights for the disenfranchised to participate in our democracy, constitutional republic. With an election swiftly approaching, we should reflect on how it was only recently when the right to vote was granted to young Americans. And voting is the cornerstone of freedom and a measure of governmental vigor and validity. So this is really short, and I'm going to show you something that I think not a lot of people understand. So this article, I'll put the link to that for everyone to see, I guess in the comments later. I'm still learning how to do that as I'm on doing this because it's just me. But it's so important. So it goes on and talks about the importance of the Constitution and the vital role of voting in our republic. Okay. It's just so important that we get out. The basic thing that we can do is vote. So what is the thing that you've been hearing in the news and everything that they're trying to do as far as the Electoral College? If you don't know what that is, I'm going to explain that here in a minute. And the national popular vote. And the big thing in 2016 was, what was Hillary's argument was, well, I won the popular vote by like 3 million people votes, right? And so I really should be the president and not Trump. And so people have been pushing even since 2000 with the debacle of 2000 vote and the hanging chads. Remember all that? I don't know if you remember it, but it went on for weeks. They've tried to change this, but you can't change it. You have to have a constitutional amendment. So I'm going to explain the history of this because it's very, very important that we understand why we have the Electoral College. So I'm going to move right to that. And again, this is an excellent article that Heritage has put out. And I'm going to bring that up here so we can go along here. Let's see. It is, Essential. That's the book. Oh, goodness. Here it is. Sorry. All right. The Essential Electoral College. And this will lead me into the booklet here. Again, this is Heritage. Our system for electing the president was carefully crafted by the framers and has worked successfully for over 200 years, protecting and nurturing our republic. The national popular vote movement aims to circumvent the constitutional amendment process and manipulate the Electoral College out of existence. Every American should be concerned that the Electoral College is under siege by an effort that would radicalize the U.S. political system. In 2020, the Heritage Foundation launched an important educational campaign to raise awareness about the importance of preserving the Electoral College. Our system for electing the president was carefully crafted, right? So they've released a new book, The Essential Electoral College, and I'm going to show this to you because it's just too important not to talk about. This ebook sounds the alarm on a current threat that imperils the future of the Electoral College. The National Popular Vote movement is an orchestrated campaign targeting state legislatures across the country, which aims to circumvent the constitutional amendment process and manipulate the Electoral College out of existence. This new scheme, being pushed by activists and misguided state legislatures, has unfortunately started to gain serious traction in several states. So far, 15 states: California, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware. Biden is from Delaware. Hawaii, Illinois, Massachusetts, Maryland, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York, Oregon, Rhode Island, Vermont, and Washington, and the District of Columbia, representing a combined 196 electoral votes, have approved the proposed scheme. The National Popular Vote is therefore 73% of the way to its goal of 270 votes, which is the electoral minimum that you have to have, and to the activation of this unconstitutional, politically dubious, and dangerous cartel. Every American should be concerned that the Electoral College is under siege. So, with that said, I want to bring to you this really, really great information that they've laid out in this booklet. And so I'm just going to walk through this with you because it's visual, but it's also very important to the steps of it, what they're talking about, the history of all this. So let's see where to go. Right here. Okay. The Electoral College. The Essential Electoral College. This is extremely important. So I'm going to go through this with you. Origins of the Electoral College. The manner of electing the president was one of the most contentious issues at the Constitutional Convention held in 1787. The founders struggled to satisfy each state's demand for greater representation while attempting to balance popular sovereignty against the risk posed to the minority from majoritarian rule. Smaller states, in particular, worried that a system that apportioned representatives based on population would underrepresent their interests in the federal structure. This concern that either the big states or the small states would have too much influence over the choice of the president was voiced by many of the delegates of the convention. They understood the dangers that a direct democracy with the potential for mob rule brings to elections. James Madison warned, in a direct democracy, a common passion or interest will, in almost every case, be felt by a majority of the whole. A communication and concert results from the form of government itself, and there is nothing to check the inducements to sacrifice the weaker party or an obnoxious individual. Hence, it is that such democracies have ever been spectacles of turbulence and contention, have ever been found incompatible with personal security or the rights of property. You can see that in many, many countries around the world, okay, that don't have this kind of system and have in general been as short in their lives as they have been violent in their deaths. After long and serious debate, they arrived at an intentional design for electing the president that would incorporate the will of the people but still safeguard against faction and tyranny. That system, the Electoral College, balances the competing interests of large states with those of smaller states. By allocating electors based on a state's cumulative representation in the House and Senate, the Electoral College system avoids purely population-based representation while still giving larger states greater electoral weight. This design incorporates the genius of a popular democracy organized on the federal principle and has been our electoral system that has operated successfully for over 200 years. So what I like to do, if I can do this, is bring you a visual because I just like visuals. And one of the most, I guess, popular visuals that I like to use is this map from the election of 2016. I'm real quick divert from that and show this. This is the election results of 2016. This is by county. If you'll notice, this is a great visual representation. I've showed this before, but what the Electoral College can do. If we didn't have the Electoral College, the little blue areas that you see here, 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 the little pockets of blue would be ruling all of the red. Their policies would be enforced upon all the people here in the red areas. So that's why the Electoral College is so extremely important. It balances out that power and that influence across the board, okay? Not just in little pockets of highly populated cities. That's what these are, highly populated cities. And then you would have cities, the elite in the cities ruling, and we would not be a constitutional republic anymore. So anyway, that's what I love about visuals. Let's go back to this article. Really good stuff here. All right. So how does the Electoral College actually work? Step 1, determine number of electors. All right. Each state has the number of electors equal to its representation in Congress, 2 senators plus 1 or more representatives proportional to population. The District of Columbia has 3 electoral votes, the same number as the least populous state as stipulated in the 23rd Amendment. Example, Oregon has 2 senators plus 5 members of the U.S. House of Representatives, so it equals 7 electors for that state. Step 2, select the electors. Article 2, Section 1 of the U.S. Constitution leaves the selection of electors to the states. In most states, this process is controlled by state political parties under rules approved by state legislatures. Electors are often chosen at state party conventions or by a state party committee and include individuals who have a dedicated history of service to the political party. Step 3, Election Day. Every 4 years, the presidential election is held on the first Tuesday following the first Monday in November. When voters cast their ballot for a presidential ticket, they are actually voting for their candidate's slate of chosen electors. So, step 4, award electoral votes. Winner takes all system. 48 states and the District of Columbia award all electors to the presidential candidate who wins the state's popular vote. The district system, Maine and Nebraska, are the only states that award 2 electoral votes to the candidate who wins the statewide popular vote, and the remaining electoral votes to the winner in each congressional district. Step 5. Winner is determined. A simple majority of the 538 total electoral votes, or 270, is needed to be elected president. If no candidate wins the majority, the House chooses the president and the Senate chooses the vice president. There's been a handful of times, I think, that we've had to do that, and it goes on here and talks about that. Step 6, meeting of electors. On the Monday after the second Wednesday in December, the electors meet in their respective states to cast their votes for the president and vice president. Then, in a joint session of Congress on the 6th of January, each state's electoral votes are counted and the president is officially elected. And then step 7 is Inauguration Day. The president-elect takes the oath of office and is sworn in as president of the United States on January 20th. My little dog is scratching my door. Can I come in, please? And I had to text my husband, please come get Pebbles. Anyway, if you hear a little whining in the background, it is my little puppy. Please let me in. So there has been contingent and disputed elections a few times in our history, and they go over that in 1824, 1800, 1876, and of course, the one we all remember, 2000, the Hanging Chads. So the benefits of the Electoral College. This is really important here. When the framers drafted the Constitution in 1787, they could not have predicted the many changes and advances that our society has undergone since the 18th century. However, through their genius and foresight, they designed an electoral system that has the ability to adapt to modern-day America and work even better than they could have anticipated. Below are some of the many benefits of the Electoral College. First, it preserves federalism. The Electoral College preserves the principles of federalism that are essential to our constitutional republic. The U.S. is a large country made up of people from very different regions and cultures, and federalism is an important way of preserving the differences that make us unique while uniting us behind one common federal government. Since the country is comprised of 50 states coming together to form the federal government, it is important that the system to elect the president fairly represent them. By allocating electoral votes by the total number of representatives in a given state, the Electoral College allows more states to have an impact on the choice of the president, not just like popular vote, like we're talking about. Okay, the second way, it encourages a broad coalition building and moderation. The Electoral College prevents presidential candidates from winning an election by focusing solely on high population urban centers and dense media markets, forcing them to seek the support of a larger cross-section of the American electorate. This addresses the founders' fears of a tyranny of the majority, which has the potential to marginalize sizable portions of the population, particularly in rural and more remote areas of the country, hence why I showed you the map. That's what would happen. Tyranny of the majority, and the majority would be the elite living in the few densely populated cities. Large cities like New York City and Los Angeles should not get to unilaterally dictate policies that affect more rural states like North Dakota and Indiana, which have very different needs. These states may be smaller, but their values still matter. They should have a say in who becomes president. By forcing presidential candidates to address all Americans during their campaigns, not just those in large cities, the Electoral College has the added benefit of eschewing radical candidates for more moderate ones. Super, super important. Okay, the next one is it promotes legitimacy of election outcomes. Oh, we've seen how that can go, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. The Electoral College increases the legitimacy and certainty of elections by magnifying the margin of victory, thereby diminishing the value of contentious recounts and providing a demonstrable election outcome and a mandate to govern. Since 1900, 17 out of 29 presidential elections have been decided by 200 or more electoral votes. In contrast, a popular vote system with just a plurality requirement could lead to the election of presidential candidates by unprecedented small margins. These smaller victory margins, combined with the overall decrease in popular support for a single candidate, could trigger chaotic and contested elections. Furthermore, a president elected by only 25% or 35% of the American people would not have a mandate to govern, and questions about his or her legitimacy could pose grave consequences both for the nation and for any actions he or she took as president. Next, it's a mechanism for stable elections. The Electoral College makes elections more stable and less likely to trigger contentious recounts. Every state has different procedural rules for the administration of elections, including how recounts are triggered and conducted and how provisional ballots are counted. The 2000 presidential election saw an unprecedented vote recount in Florida that was a belabored, emotional, and costly process, even though it was limited to only one state. With a national popular vote, every additional vote a presidential candidate could obtain anywhere in the country could make the difference between winning or losing a national election. This provides a strong added incentive for recounts, even on a full national level, anytime suspicious activities occur in even a single district. What a mess that would be. And it discourages voter fraud. While no system can completely eliminate the risk of individuals trying to cheat the system, the Electoral College minimizes the incentive for voter fraud because the system isolates the impact of stolen votes. Under the current system, stolen votes only affect the outcome of one state rather than the national outcome. This is because fraudulent votes may win the state, securing the electoral votes, but it would make no difference for the candidate to win that state with 100 stolen votes or 100,000, since the candidate would secure the same electoral votes regardless. Under a national popular vote system, though, votes stolen in one state would have an impact beyond that state's border, since those illegitimate votes would be added to the national vote total. Here is two false claims that maybe you've heard kind of that they say trying to, debunk or try to taint the Electoral College, all right? So here is two false claims. One is that swing states hold all the power. Opponents of the Electoral College argue that swing states garner all the attention of candidates, and that would change with a popular vote system. But swing states can change from election to election, and many states that are today considered reliably blue or red in the presidential race were recently unpredictable or have otherwise changed in their political makeup. Since 1968, 34 out of 50 states have been labeled as swing states at one time or another. And the second myth is the Electoral College was designed to protect slavery. Some have made the false historical claim that the Electoral College was enacted to protect slavery. Critics charge that because 3/5 of the slave population was included in the representation tabulation, it supposedly gave Southern states a political advantage with more Electoral College votes. Significantly, though, when the proposal for the Electoral College was voted on during the Constitutional Convention, Northern states with a lower slave population unanimously voted for the proposal. Yet, with the exception of Virginia, the southern states with a higher population of slaves voted against it. Moreover, when the Constitution was drafted, slavery was practiced in every state, and the number of slaves did not give the southern states a particular advantage. According to the 1790 census, New York and Virginia were the largest slaveholding states north and south of the Mason-Dixon line. If you subtracted the entire slave populations present in each state, Virginia still had a larger population of free people than New York and still would have had more representatives in Congress and a larger electoral vote. In fact, the Electoral College contributed to ending slavery, since Abraham Lincoln, having only earned 39.9% of the popular vote in 1860, nevertheless won a crushing victory in the Electoral College, leading many Southern slaveowners to stampede to secession in 1860 and 61. They could run the numbers as well as anyone and realized the Electoral College would only produce more anti-slavery Northern presidents. See, Abraham Lincoln would not have been elected if it hadn't been for the Electoral College. So the current threat is the national popular vote movement. And this is an interesting graph here. 6 cities outweigh 14 states in population combined. So the combined population of LA, San Francisco, Chicago, New York, Boston, and Philadelphia, 17,612,000, would outweigh the combined populations of Montana, North Dakota, oh my gosh, all these right here, all these 14 states. That's just crazy. They would have more population than these 17 states combined. And New York City has a bigger population than 39 individual states. Do you see? Are you getting the very vital importance of the Electoral College? That's why it's so important and why we have to fight against this national popular vote movement. We can't do that. A constitutional system worth preserving. It is worth preserving. The Electoral College helps preserve our constitutional system. It has been used successfully, all right, for 200 years. Okay? It accomplishes its intended purpose, all right? So we cannot let that, and that hopefully what I did was bring some information to you about the Electoral College. So when you do hear this, let's do the national popular vote in the news, you'll be like, no, okay? Tell people you know, don't. No, the national popular vote will not work. And I'll bring you again why in a visual. That's why, right here. This is why it does not work. This is what they're talking about. The population of just these cities outweighs, what was it? New York City alone has a bigger population than 39 individual states. And the 6-city population outweighs 7 or 14 combined states. So, Electoral College, extremely, extremely vital to our constitutional republic. Extremely vital. Which leads me to also what they're trying to do lately. You've heard about it, I'm sure, and everywhere you can hear in the news because of the virus, we have to have mail-in ballots. Mail-in ballots for the safety of everyone. Okay? They scare people. They keep everyone scared. And so they won't get out and vote. But if you can go to the grocery store, if you can go to a restaurant, if you can do all these things, if you can stand in line, like, I've had to stand in line. And when we were in Minnesota, I had to stand in line to get into the grocery store. They were only allowed a certain amount of people in. If you can stand in line to do that, you can stand in line to go vote in person. All right. I'm going to explain or I'll show you that here in a second. Did I miss something? Oh, let me think here. I will share that mail-in ballot information or the guide for the Electoral College with you on my comments when I finish posting this, and that can be there for you to see. Okay, so mail-in ballots issues. This is an interesting article in the New York Post. I know this was back in August 1st, so some other things have happened since August 1st, but this should open your eyes a little bit. All right, a fundamental and tragic fact of life in America today is that whatever President Trump is for, most media and half the country instantly reject it. Even when he's clearly right, the zombie-like resistance leaps into frenetic opposition. Take the case of universal mail-in voting. Trump insists that the plans of some states, such as California and Colorado, to counter the pandemic by mailing a ballot to every registered voter is a formula for disaster. It will, the president says, guarantee mayhem and cast doubts on the November results. Okay, there are lots of evidence that this has already happened, or lots of it. And here he goes and talks about a few places. So lots of it. And right in front of us, thanks to the continuing saga of 2 New York congressional races, 5 weeks after the Democrat primaries, no winners have been declared. That was back in August 1st. Results for 2 others were delayed for 3 weeks. The major problem was the volume of mailed-in ballots, more than 400,000 across the city against the 23,000 received and validated 4 years ago. Geez, that's huge amount. The Board of Elections, creaky, sloppy, and unreliable on the best of days, is swamped. In the race involving Democratic incumbent and then her challenger, in-person voting gave Maloney an edge of under 700 votes, but some 65,000 voters returned the absentee ballots they requested. And mailed ballots trigger additional safeguards and requirements. Among those are proof the ballots were mailed by Election Day and received within 7 days of the election. In that Maloney-Patel race, at least 12,000 mailed ballots have been invalidated, many because they were received too late and others because they had no postmark to prove when they were mailed. He goes on and he talks about some more issues. So that's just one place that had 400,000 mail-in votes in one city, state, whatever, and the problems that they had with mail-in voting there. So, yeah, you think if that happens there in just one place, it's not going to happen nationally? That's why you hear the Democrats getting all their lawyers lined up to contest this. That's why you hear Hillary Clinton say, do not concede to Joe Biden. Do not concede on election night. That's what she says. She says it. I showed the video in one of my videos before. She says, do not concede. Wow. What is going on? So, this brings me to something very interesting that I heard. If you do not follow Tucker, he has been bringing some very vital information on his shows lately. And this one kind of really got me to looking into what he was talking about. I had never heard of it, and I'm sure people in maybe some CIA or kind of institutions in our government know about this because this is what they do. But I want to show you this video because it's kind of alarming. It's not kind of alarming. It is very alarming. I don't know why kind of alarming is. Let me see if I can find it here. This is it, I think. All right. Yes. So let's listen to what Tucker says and interviews this guy. Wow. let's see if this doesn't alarm you like it did me. And then I'm going to explain a little bit because I followed up with an article on what he was talking about. So yeah, let's see if you can hear this. I hope it doesn't like echo.
Nationwide mail-in balloting isn't simply an invitation to voter fraud, though of course it's definitely that. But more important, perhaps, it is a virtual guarantee that in November we will see a swarm of lawyers arguing which votes should be counted. It won't be a question of who got the most votes, it'll be a question of who has the most lawyers. And that is a contest Democrats think they can win. It's happened several times this year already, by the way, in various races around the country. In New York, for example, a recent congressional primary, mail-in voting meant that judges spent weeks deciding how to count votes that were postmarked late or arrived late. The Democratic operatives who run Joe Biden's campaign know this, of course, which is why they're trying to tell you, you're not allowed to criticize mail-in voting. Anything that increases their power, you may not question. In this case, they want the uncertainty over the outcome of the election so they can manipulate the results. And they're not even really trying to hide this. The campaign recently created what is called a special litigation unit, which, needless to say, is staffed with hundreds of lawyers to handle election disputes. This is the party of lawyers. It's one thing they have a lot of. It's the party of the trial bar. One attorney working in that group is a Democratic operative called Mark Elias. Elias has spent the year fighting state laws that outlaw something called ballot harvesting, maybe the most egregious thing we allow in any election in this country. It is the practice that allows political operatives to collect ballots from people and turn them in en masse. It is an invitation to fraud, which is exactly why Democrats want it to be national policy with no restrictions at all. Someone who's been watching all of this is Darren Beattie. He's a former speechwriter for President Trump. He works now with Revolver News, the website. He says this is part of a familiar plan. In a recent piece, Revolver argued that Democratic operatives, including some who testified during the impeachment proceedings, are adopting the same tactics that U.S. intel agencies use to start so-called color revolutions in places like Ukraine. Darren Beattie joins us tonight to explain. Darren, thanks so much for coming on. So for our viewers who are not familiar with the color revolutions in Eastern Europe, state as clearly as you can what you think is going on right now in this election. What's the end game for Democrats?
Yes, thank you for having me. Many have described the actions taken against Trump as a coup. And this is certainly correct, but it's a little bit general and vague. What's unfolding before our eyes is a very specific type of coup called the color revolution. It's a regime change model favored by many in our national security apparatus, particularly against Eastern European countries, to overthrow, target regimes that they don't like. One model, which is not the color revolution model, is purely sending a bunch of troops into a country and removing by military force a leader you don't like. That's like the Iraq model.
Right.
The color revolution model is a little bit more delicate and subtle, has several characteristics, but the chief characteristics of it is a combination of an engineered contested elections scenario combined with massive mobilized protests, which they call, as a term of art, peaceful protests and acts of civil disobedience. If that sounds familiar, it gets even better. It's not only the same strategies and tactics used against Trump that's used against Eastern European dictators that our national security apparatus doesn't like. It's literally the same people who are color revolution professionals who have a long history of using these same tactics against foreign leaders they don't like to use against democratically elected President Donald Trump. It's the same people using the very same playbook. Now, I'd like to talk about one of the key figures in this operation, a nexus point not only between color revolutions overseas and the color revolution against Trump, but a nexus point between lawfare and mass mobilization and so-called peaceful protests. This is a man by the name of Norm Eisen. Norm Eisen is a key legal hatchet man, Democrat operative, former Obama ethics czar, believe it or not. And he is also a key architect of nearly every effort to censor, sue, impeach, and overthrow the president. He is the author of, in fact, a color revolution playbook, literally called the playbook. And one of the items he calls for in his playbook to overthrow regimes overseas he doesn't like is engineering election fraud scenarios, using election fraud to engineer mass protests to question the legitimacy of the target leader. Norm Eisen has a long and checkered history going all the way back to his days at Crew, which is a lawfare arm. He's been behind over 180 lawsuits against Trump. He authored 10 articles of impeachment before the president's phone call was even made. He was special counsel to the Democrats for the impeachment process. He was literally involved in every aspect of this color revolution against Trump. His latest act, and perhaps his greatest act coming up, is to use lawfare in order to overturn the 2020 election using various legal theories, principally his theory about...
Norm Eisen. Remember the name. I'm sorry, Darren, we're out of time. I appreciate it.
So, did that not concern you? Sorry. Does that not concern you?
Nationwide mail-in balloting isn't
totally, alarmed me. I was like, I had never heard of that term, color revolution. And so I looked it up, and they have a kind of an article that kind of talks about what he was talking about. And I'll bring that up to you, because this is everything I'm bringing to you. You know, I've tried to bring you information that maybe you've heard, maybe you haven't heard, but yeah, it's kind of crazy. So this is talking about that guy, Norm Eisen. And I'll read this to you because it's just so, I was just, this kind of shows you the truth that what has been going on the last 4 years with President Trump and all these crazy impeachment and then the phone call and the Russia collusion hoax and the lies in the media and everything like that, that it was a concerted effort by this architect. You know, the architect of it was this guy. So meet Norm Eisen, legal hatchet man and central operative in the, quote, color revolution, unquote, against President Trump. All right. In our report on Never Trump State Department official George Kent, Revolver News first drew attention to the ominous similarities between the strategies and tactics the U.S. government employs in so-called color revolutions and the coordinated efforts of government bureaucrats, NGOs, and the media to oust President Trump. Our recent follow-up to this initial report focused specifically on a shadowy George Soros-linked group called the Transition Integrity Project, and I talked about that in my last video, which convened war games exercises suggesting the likelihood of a contested election scenario and of ensuing chaos should President Trump refuse to leave office. We further showed how these contested election scenarios we are hearing so much about play perfectly into the color revolution framework sketched out Revolver News' first installment in the Color Revolution series. And I will get that to you. I'm still researching some of that, but I will link all this in the comments. Try to do that in the comments on YouTube, but also Facebook. This third installment of Revolver News' series exposing the color revolution against Trump will focus on one quiet and indeed mostly overlooked participant in the Transition Integrity Project's biased election war games exercise, a man by the name of Norm Eisen, as the man who implemented the David Brock blueprint for suing the president into paralysis and his allies into bankruptcy. Have you not heard of like General Flynn and Roger Stone and all these people that they go after that are supposedly connected with Trump? He also helped mainstream and amplify the Russia hoax. He drafted 10 articles of impeachment for the Democrats a full month before President Trump had ever called the Ukraine president in 2018. He personally served as special counsel litigating the Ukraine impeachment. He created a template for internet censorship of world leaders and a handbook for mass mobilizing racial justice protesters to overturn democratic election results. There is perhaps no man alive with a more decorated resume for plots against President Trump. Indeed, the story of Norm Eisen, a key architect of nearly every attempt to delegitimize, impeach, censor, sue, and remove the democratically elected 45th President of the United States, is a tale that winds through the nearly every facet of the color revolution playbook. There is no pure embodiment of Revolver's thesis that the very same regime change professionals who run color revolutions on behalf of the U.S. government in order to undermine or overthrow alleged authoritarian governments overseas are running the very same playbook to overturn Trump's 2016 victory and to preempt a repeat in 2020. To put it simply, what you see is not just the same color revolution playbook run against Trump, but the same people using it against Trump, who have employed it in a professional capacity against targets overseas. Same people, same playbook. In Norm Eisen's case, the same people, same playbook refrain takes an arrestingly literal turn when one realizes that Norm Eisen wrote a classic color revolution regime change manual and conveniently titled it The Playbook. Just what exactly is President Obama's former White House ethics czar? Yes, Norm Eisen was Obama's ethics czar, his longtime friend since Harvard Law School, who recently partook in the war games to simulate overturning a Trump electoral victory. What is he doing writing a detailed playbook on how to use a color revolution to overthrow governments? The story of Norm Eisen only gets more fascinating, outrageous, and indispensable to the understanding the planned chaos unfolding before our eyes, leading up to what will perhaps be the most chaotic election in our nation's history. Before we can fully appreciate the significance of Norm Eisen's color revolution manual, The Playbook, we must contextualize this important book in relation to its place in color revolution literature. As a bit of a refresher to the reader, for those who don't know, like I didn't know what that meant, it is important to emphasize that when we use the term color revolution, we do not mean any general type of revolution. Indeed, one of the chief advantages of the color revolution framework we advance is that it offers a specific and concrete heuristic by which to understand the operations against Trump beyond the accurate but more vague term coup. Unlike the overt, blunt method of full-scale military invasion, as was the case in the Iraq War, a color revolution employs the following strategies and tactics. A color revolution in this context refers to a specific type of coordinated attack that the United States government has been known to deploy against foreign regimes, particularly in Eastern Europe, deemed to be authoritarian and hostile to American interest. Rather than using a direct military intervention to effect regime change, as in Iraq, color revolutions attack a foreign regime by contesting its electoral legitimacy, organizing mass protests and acts of civil disobedience, more like riots, and leveraging media contacts to ensure favorable coverage to their agenda in the Western press. This combination of tactics used in so-called color revolutions did not come from nowhere. Before Norm Eisen came Gene Sharp. originator and godfather of the color revolution model that has been a staple of the U.S. government operations externally and now internally for decades. So, before Norm Eisen's playbook, there was Gene Sharp's classic From Dictatorship to Democracy, which might be justly described as the Bible of the color revolution. Such is the power of the strategies laid out by Sharp that a Lithuanian defense minister once said of Sharp's preceding book that I would rather have this book than the nuclear bomb. And then there's more on this on another article. But that was so alarming to me. It just made everything come into make sense what had happened the last 4 years. That this was not just people, not only do they hate him because he disrupted their power solidification that would have happened with Hillary. Okay. And now they're putting forth this candidate in Biden who is very obviously being used. It's so obvious that he is not there, that he has his mental health has greatly been diminished in the last few months and last year, and that just continues to deteriorate on a daily basis. It's almost sinister and evil that they would use a man like that in such capacity that even his wife, I don't understand it, except that they absolutely want to get power back. Okay. And this is all coming together, and it's going to be an interesting, to say the least, election season. So what can we do, right? I bring you all this information, but what can we do about it? Obviously, as Christians, I just want to wake you up to what really is happening, what's really going on, because that needs to spur us on to pray even more, to not just, dear Lord Jesus, bless the president, but this is like a major spiritual warfare thing going on right now. And we really need to press in and be praying, not just for the president, but for, number one, obviously we pray for the salvation of all these people, right? But if that doesn't happen, what we need is exposure to their evil plots, and that justice would come, that the justice and equality and justice for all would be equality and justice for all, right? That's what we are lacking right now. So what can we do? Obviously, as Christians, like I said, pray, pray, pray. And I mean, get in there and spiritual warfare battle prayer. The other thing is the last thing I'm going to bring to you from, again, Heritage. And I'm going to put this link because they have a really great information. And it's Citizens Guide to Fight for America. And this is really short, but it has a lot of other stuff in there. So here are 5 steps to get started. The first is sign up for the Citizens Guide to start receiving action items to your inbox. Make sure that you and your friends are registered to vote. And then vote, obviously. Number 3, sign the police pledge. The police pledge. Because if we don't have, you can see it. If we don't have law and order, how are we going to have legitimate elections? And the police pledge, back the blue, and pledge signers. So far, here are the people who have signed it. A lawful society free from mob rule and violent insurrection is not possible without law enforcement. When police officers have chosen a noble profession, they dedicate their lives to upholding the law and protecting the sacred rights of their fellow citizens. So you go in there and you sign the police pledge. Another thing you can do, they say, is write an op-ed or a letter to the editor of your local newspaper on an issue that matters to you. And I'm going to put this link because they give you pointers on how to do that. And then number 5, want to make an even bigger difference is become a Heritage Action Sentinel. And I'm one of those. You sign up to do that, and you can get phone calls on very important legislative issues that are going on in Capitol Hill, and they'll give you information that you might not find in the news, and follow different bills that are happening in the House and in the Senate. And that way you can spread the news about it and get people informed, because you have to be informed. All right. You have to have knowledge. And then, of course, download this pocket card, the one I went through with you no, I didn't go through that one with you. This is a pocket card on talking points by issue. And this is really, really very informative. So it's really, really good. So I'm going to put that link on there about Citizens Guide to Fighting for America and the election 2020. So, also another great guide in this election season coming up, because the last day to register to vote is October 5th. That's coming up pretty quick, October 5th. And then, of course, a couple weeks after that is early voting starts for the election, November 3rd. But go to truthandliberty.net, and they have a Vote Your Values or voter guide. They have a voter guide, I think, for each state. And then they have a presidential voter guide. And I'm going to go through that in another episode and show you kind of some policy differences, not just policy differences, but as Christians, some of the principles and values that we should hold dear. Life, we should hold life dear in any form. Preborn, unborn, and born, we should hold all life dear, and elderly. But also other religious freedom issues and things like that. So, sorry about that. So I just wanted to bring this information to you because we're coming up on it. We're coming up on election. It's just a couple, few weeks away, and it's extremely important. And it's extremely important that you as a Christian don't be one of these 15 to 20 million evangelicals that are not registered to vote. That's just shameful. That's absolutely shameful, because as Christians, it's our duty, like I said in the beginning, to influence our society for good, because what we believe in and our values makes everything better if we follow Jesus, okay, not religion, okay, not necessarily the religion of it, but the relationship with Jesus gives us freedoms. And if we have freedoms, we want to share that freedom with everyone else. And in order to do that, we have to vote for values that follow biblical values. And it's unequivocal, and it's just there's just no other word for it. You just have to see that everything that the Republican platform stands for is just so aligns with biblical values. Okay. I'm just going to leave it there. Are Republicans perfect? Absolutely not. Okay. They have been too quiet on a lot of issues, and too cowardly on a lot of issues. And there's been a handful of them that speak out, but they get, suppressed or quieted, or you just don't hear them. Okay. You hear the news. So obviously get registered to vote and go vote. Don't be the 40% of registered voters, evangelical voters, that did not vote, like in 2018. And we saw what happened there. So we have to vote. I don't care if you don't like Donald Trump, put that aside. That doesn't matter. His personality should not matter. His stance on issues should matter. And he has a really good record of it for Christians. Okay. You need to wake up and look at his record. Okay. Look at his stance on life, on religious liberty, on all kinds of things. And I'm going to do, like I said, another podcast episode or whatever on that. So thank you for joining me, StraightTalkWithMJ.net. I appreciate you listening. Hope this gets to my Facebook Live, since I have to circumvent that, since Facebook has banned me from live videos for 30 days. But hopefully you can see that. But pray, be ready, be aware, inform yourself, and then inform your family and your friends. Okay, it's important, very, very important. Register to vote and share this. And I'll put all these links here as soon as I hang up. As soon as I hang up. But God bless. Follow me at straighttalkwithmj.net, and all my podcast episodes are there, and I'll even put these videos on there too.